stats and stuff that I'm into. And I imagine if you're following me and watching this, you're into it as well. So I'm really happy to have him. Kelley, welcome to Dawgs Central.
Thanks, Josh. Glad to be here. Yeah, I've seen your stuff from afar for a long time, so excited to join you tonight.
Yeah, we're Kelley has been working through the numbers just like I have and throwing some stats out there, and he's really dug into some of the preseason stuff. I'm still relishing a little bit in the 2021 campaign that Georgia had. But you were pretty high on Georgia all year long. I saw, obviously you downgraded them just slightly after the SEC championship. But is there anything you want to any dog porn, as we like to say in Georgia Twitter, that you want to talk about in 2021 before we talk about our preseason stuff?
Well, yeah, first, Josh, I want to say I do think Georgia was fantastic last year. They were my number one team in my power ratings, starting at, I think it was in week 4 or 5 that they climbed to the number one spot, and they stayed there for the rest of the year. So even after losing in the SEC championship game, Georgia remained the number one power rated team in my metric. They were not the number one most deserving team after the SEC championship game. That was Alabama, and I did have Michigan 2 and Georgia number 3, so same as the committee. But in terms of power ratings, my numbers liked Georgia going into the playoff to win it and then into the national championship game, which they did, of course. And I was actually fortunate enough to be at that game. I live in Indy, and I was able to work that game, so it was really cool to see Alabama and Georgia part 2 in person, up close and in person. It was awesome.
Oh, that is cool. So with that, so tell me a little about how you're most deserving and your power ratings, and what is the nuanced difference between those, and somebody that's reading your stuff, what just explain to them what that means to somebody just looking at your graphs and stats on website and Twitter.
Yeah, so the KFord ratings, those are my predictive power ratings. So for those, there's really 2 segments of inputs. The first is the preseason, which is where we are now. And as you mentioned, I'm getting very close to putting the finishing touches on my final official 2022 preseason numbers. But the main inputs into that are returning production, recent recruiting with the most recent classes weighted most heavily, and then recent team performance, meaning teams' most recent KFord ratings from previous seasons, with, again, the most recent seasons weighted most heavily. So that's it for the preseason. And then once we get into in-season data, I can start using in-game data, of course, and that's really for the large part of what I'm doing. It's primarily the 5 factors that Bill Connolly made famous a while back now. It's explosiveness, efficiency, which is most heavily weighted, field position, finishing drives, and turnovers. So I have a few other pieces that go into it as well, but those are really the main nuts and bolts of the power ratings model. And then as you asked, what's the difference between that in the most deserving rankings, so not ratings but rankings, what I'm doing is looking at what has every single team accomplished on the field in this season to this given point of the season. So I'm using my KFord ratings as the engine for that, but think ESPN strength of record. It's very similar to that. I take a little extra step that compared to strength of record and add in a dominance factor. So basically looking at how much did you beat or lose to an opponent by at a given location relative to what would be expected of the average top 25 team to either beat or lose to that opponent at that location. So those are really the 2 main differences. You've got the KFord power ratings, that's forward looking, and then you have the most deserving rankings, and that's a resume metric, which is looking backwards.
So just fill you guys in. Kelley's ratings are used part of the Massey. Is it Massey Peabody, or is it just the Massey ratings that are on the Washington Post each week? I mean, you're doing some heavy lifting and a lot of, and your stuff is widely respected on what you're doing. And what you're talking about, your dominance factor, I mean, that's just basically old BCS margin of victory in a nutshell, is it not?
Yeah. So yes, it is margin of victory, but again, it's translated into what would be expected to be the margin of victory for the average top 25 team. That way, it's a way to encompass strength of schedule kind of, and then also the performance of the team, the result of the game versus what would be expected. And we normalize it across all teams by using that common denominator of the average top 25 team. And then to your first point, yes, Ken Massey has been gracious enough to include my power ratings in kind of his composite metric that he looks at with all the different people that are out there making college football power ratings, which there are plentiful of course. So I'm just excited to be one of those.
Okay, so with that, let's talk about your realistic expectations that you put out on Twitter for the top 25, and then we'll kind of dig into some SEC stuff here. See if I can press the right button. Boom. Okay, there we go. So the here's Kelley's realistic expectations for 2022. And let me put it in full screen. So you've got Ohio State at 11 expected wins. Right behind them is Georgia, Alabama, Clemson. And then you've got Michigan and Oklahoma filling out sort of well, I guess it kind of falls off there, looking at a 13% chance for Clemson and just a 3% chance for Michigan to win 12 games. So run us through these here. As you can see, it's a pretty simple graph. It's like the chances of each team winning X amount of games. Obviously, all of these top 10 guys are going to win at least 6 games and, pretty much in the high 90s to win 8 or more games.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to make the note that these are based on my preliminary numbers, which I did earlier this summer. I'm in the process, as I said, of finalizing the preseason numbers. They're not going to change a ton from these, but they are going to change slightly here in the next couple of weeks when I repost this with the updated numbers. But yeah, basically what you just said, I use my KFord power ratings to simulate the season, and then based on those simulation results, this is the output of that. So it's saying that Ohio State and Georgia, I'm expecting both of those teams to, on average, win 11 of their 12 regular season games this year. Ohio State's got a 34% chance to go 12-0. Georgia right behind it, 33% chance. So I'm not pinpointing with this any single game that I think Georgia and Ohio State will lose. I'm saying the cumulative averages here, the cumulative effect of playing all these games is that on average, you can expect both those teams and Alabama for that matter to lose one. They're going to be favored in all of them. They're actually going to be favored by double digits by my preliminary numbers in every single game they play. All 3 of those teams, they're a very clear-cut tier 1 this year with Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, not necessarily in that order. But I'm saying that on average, I expect each of them to lose one game. But don't ask me which one it is because I'm not going to pick one that they're going to lose. But that's basically what this is saying. And then as you go down the list there, you can see all the other percentages. Last note on this graph or this chart, it is just the Power 5 teams that are included in this one. You can check out my Twitter to see the one that had the group of 5 included as well.
Okay, so what jumps out at me is I don't see SC on here, do I not? And then you've got UCLA there behind Utah as possibly the second best team in the Pac-12. Am I missing something here? Because that's pretty that jumps out at me. And also NC State, Miami are all I don't want to say nipping at the heels of Clemson, but that should be a more competitive ACC than we've seen in recent years.
So let me take the first question first with regard to USC and the Pac-12, or I guess Pac-12 for now, with them and UCLA, which is a whole other conversation. But looking at those teams in particular, I will say that USC has made a jump from my preliminary numbers to my updated numbers and will likely make another little jump into my final official preseason numbers. So I do expect when I repost this, USC will be appearing on this chart. They won't be as high as UCLA, though, and that does not mean I think UCLA is a better team than USC this year. I don't. My predicted numbers like USC more than I like UCLA. UCLA has the easiest schedule in all of the Power 5 this year. I mean, no Power 5 team has an easier schedule by my numbers than UCLA. So part of this is, yes, I expect these teams to be pretty strong this year, but also factoring in their schedule into this chart as well. So that's why you see UCLA there and you don't see USC. 1, I'm not as high on USC as many others are, but 2, USC was just a slightly more difficult schedule than UCLA. And then to your second question there, Josh, about Clemson versus Pittsburgh and Miami, NC State, Clemson is the best team in the ACC by my numbers. Now, they were last year as well in the preseason, and we saw how that actually played out on the field, but power rating wise, Clemson throughout the season last year remained one of, if not the best team in the ACC. Again, a lot of this comes back to the talent they have on the roster based on how they recruited, their recent success, what have you. They were also maybe unlucky to lose a game or 2 last year. So yes, I do have Clemson as the best team. Pittsburgh, Miami, NC State, all kind of in that next group, but I do expect Clemson to be the class of the ACC this year. We'll see if they burn me like they did last year or if Dabo gets them to bounce back.
Yeah, I think anyone that's not living or rooting for teams in the upper Piedmont, South Carolina is kind of cheering for NC State. And just anything, I imagine other parts of the country, they're probably cheering against Georgia and Alabama as well. But I'm kind of like, I don't know why, maybe just because I'm digging into a lot more teams, working with Graham and everybody on Dawgs Central, that having to dig a lot deeper into some of these teams. And I liked UCLA too. To be sort of kind of maybe a team that can make some noise out west. Everyone seems to think Utah is a clear and head and shoulders best team in the Pac-12. We'll see about that. I'm not fading them by any stretch of the imagination, but I'd like to see possibly UCLA bounce back. I don't know why. So real quick though, so you talked about Bill Connolly's metrics and stuff, the 5 basics. So you're building a top down metric, and you're not do you have player level data, or do you factor in injuries in the season? Or talk to me about a little more, if you feel like sharing just a little more about what goes into those ratings.
Yeah, for sure. So again, first question first there. I do have player level data built in the form of returning production. And then also, I guess in a tangential way, through the in-game stats. Now, again, I'm looking at those really at a team level, but obviously the player is the one responsible for making those. I see players more as just numbers, right, than I do actual names. And actually, to me, that helps keep it a little bit more objective and not get biased towards this, that, or the other. But yes, I do take into account player level data, not to the level of extremes that people who look at X's and O's do, but it does come in mainly in the form of returning production. To your second question about what about injuries, that's a massive caveat every single week that I put out there, especially when I was doing a bunch of handicapping and putting out best bets is, hey, here's what my numbers say, but it's not accounting for injury to player X, Y, and Z on team A. So, and again, depending on what positions players X, Y, and Z play, like if it's a quarterback, okay, that's a big deal. If it's an outside linebacker, maybe not, at least not as big of a deal. So yes, I do have player level, do not account for injuries. Same thing with suspensions, that's again not accounted for. Coaching changes, that's not accounted for. Anything intangible is not accounted for in my power ratings. Everything gets picked up in the most deserving rankings, because that is strictly win-loss based with, again, some margin of victory or defeat played in there, all normalized to a similar or exact same level of expected using the average top 25 team.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I keep messing. I'm basically just kind of explaining stats and using stats to break down games, and I'm definitely trying to get more into the predictive stuff. And I'm looking at success rate and yards per play, and one thing I've kind of looked at is actual offensive points scored by a successful play you have in a game. Georgia ran something like 31 to 32 successful plays and managed to get 38 points out of it, which is one of the higher. That's just another efficiency metric, which is built into what you do. But I'm trying to get it to where I'm actually putting a number on the game, because it's easy to say, well, this team's 51% success rate, that one's 47. What does that mean in points? But that's what you do such a good job with is going through and like you said, you run this preseason model and predicted all of these games, and that's where your percentages come from. So back to the percentages, we're looking at the SEC, and this is kind of cool. You're kind of looking at the first half of the season. This is the record through 6 games. Can you see that, Kelley? Because I'm gonna.
Yep.
Okay, great. Interesting. You had Alabama at a higher power rating on the top 25 there, but you've got Alabama just a little bit ahead here. Obviously, you're splitting hairs. Literally, it's 65 to 64% chance of winning the first 6 games. So that's, to me, that jumped out as me kind of low. But that, you kind of touched on that earlier. That isn't. You're not trying to predict that Georgia's going to lose a game. But it's talk to me about your record through 6 game metric here we got.
Yeah, so this seemed to be like a really popular question on Twitter on a week or two ago, whenever it was. People were like, what's going to be Team X's record through 6 games? What's going to be Team Y's record? And I was like, I don't know where this is coming from. I'm not on Twitter all day, every day. I do like to get on there, obviously, and post some stuff and interact with people. But I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this for everybody and post my results. So I did it for all 131 FBS teams, broken out by conference. So you can see here, as you mentioned, what the SEC's looks like. And yeah, again, Alabama, Georgia, both at 5.6%, 5.6 expected wins in their first 6 games. So I'm actually not even expecting, if you round that up to 6-0, I mean, I'm not expecting either of them to lose a game in their first 6. But again, the cumulative effect of playing those games, I wouldn't be totally shocked if one of them did drop one in the first 6. Ole Miss, the only other team over 5 in the first 6. This is very schedule dependent, right? Yeah. So if you're looking at the SEC, overall, the SEC is a stronger conference than really any other conference. So in the non-conference portion of the season, you're going to have tough games, right? Like Florida's playing Utah. That's going to be a really tough game for Florida. I know it's in the swamp, but that's going to be hard. Alabama's playing Texas. I know people like to laugh at Texas, but you're going on the road. I'm going to have Bama by over 2 touchdowns, but that's a game that theoretically they could lose. Like there are definitely some high-profile games that they have on the slate. Georgia, for that matter, has Oregon, right? Like that's a massive game. And Dan Lanning's in there, so that's a whole nother layer that's baked in, which is awesome. But all in all, on average, the SEC's number in the first 6 is going to be greater than any other conference because you have all those non-conference games that are mixed in. And that's where the SEC being the favorite in those games is going to lead to more expected wins.
So looking at, I know this is the first 6 games. We didn't see Kentucky on that top 25. Do you see Kentucky as the challenger, or are you more on Tennessee in the challenger in the SEC East?
So overall, I would say that my numbers, if I look at both of them, how they stack up in my preseason KFord ratings, the updated ones, I have Tennessee as the better team than Kentucky. They're both top 25 teams, but Tennessee's pushing top 15, maybe just outside of that for right now. So in the East, I think Tennessee is probably the greatest threat to Georgia. But back to the first graphic, just because of how the graphic that we're going to be looking at, how the schedule sets up, that Kentucky might win more games this year than Tennessee just because of the schedule they're playing. I think Tennessee is going to be the better team, but how the schedule sets up for Kentucky, they might find themselves number 2 in the East at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be a dogfight there between Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky. A lot of people are bringing up South Carolina as possible upset Georgia early in the season. I just don't see it. They've got a lot of things going right. I just think Georgia's defense is going to be still really, really good. They're hopefully the team. We hear a lot reload, not rebuild. Georgia's defense is poised to do just that.
Absolutely. I think just to touch on South Carolina there, I think what you said about Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida, to me, in my numbers, though, that's definitely the group of main contenders to Georgia. Georgia's going to be the overwhelming favorite in the East. If they get beat, probably going to be by one of those teams. South Carolina, improving. They got Spencer Rattler in there. I think they're building something, but the schedule's tough this year, and they still might be a year or two away from kind of being in that next tier behind Georgia in the East.
Yeah, you talk about intangibles that you can't and don't try to accommodate. I do think they've got a good coach over there, and Beamer is going to see that team improve over the next couple of years. And if the talent gap that Florida doesn't catch up, I can see USC being really good, second tier team in the SEC East. So cool. All right, so I'm going to show another graph here. This is the projected to win more in 2022. This is all your stuff's great. If you guys aren't following Kelley on Twitter, you got to. You get tons of stuff. It's real simple. His stuff is, he does, I know you do some things. I don't know if you've seen his gifts or his movies where over the years you see their power ratings go up and down or some of the other stuff, but he does some really clean, straightforward graphics that you don't have to understand an XY scatter plot to get, which I appreciate. And this is one just like this. Here are 20 teams, 25 teams that are expected to win more. At the top of the list is Nebraska, which I kind of love this. They were unlucky last year. You have to expect that that's going to regress and that some of those close losses are going to turn into W's this year. And I think they're better. You're going to be better this year. So run through a couple of these teams that jumped out at you and you're projected to win more in 2022 than 2021.
Yeah, so like you said, it's a pretty straightforward chart here. Nebraska at the top, as you said, they were unlucky last year. They underachieved. I expect them to be really the second best team in the Big Ten West this year, right behind Wisconsin. So I expect to see a big turnaround there for Scott Frost and Lincoln. If they don't get that, I'm not sure Scott Frost will be there in 23, but we'll see. I think he's doing a better job than the record shows.
Tulane may not be there in Thanksgiving if he doesn't.
Well, yeah, and they got to make hay early too. I think. I know they have a game against Oklahoma, but the early part of the Big Ten schedule really sets up well for Nebraska. Tulane, same thing. A team that underachieved last year, pretty unlucky. Texas, you can almost say this every year, it seems like recently. Underachievers, a lot of talent there. I do expect them to have a nice improvement record-wise. USC, same deal as Texas. So really, the teams right there at the top, they're either unlucky last year or have a lot of talent on campus and just underachieved regardless of their luck. Like you could say USC, I don't think they were really unlucky last year. I think they just underachieved and they didn't live up to the potential that they had. They made some changes, right? They're bringing in some new offensive weapons in the portal. The reason you didn't see USC on my chart earlier, though, the problem was not the offense last year for USC. So I know they're bringing in Caleb Williams. I know they're bringing in Addison. I know you're bringing in all of these flashy toys at the skill positions on the offensive side of the ball. I got to see the defense improve before I'm ready to say USC is going to be a contender, let alone for the playoff. I'm just talking for the Pac-12 championship. And then this kind of persists throughout. Indiana was a team that just grossly underachieved last year. I expect them to get a little bump this year. It's interesting when you see a team like Ohio State end up on this graphic because, hey, you think, well, Ohio State, geez, they won 10 games last year? Yeah, well, at Ohio State in Columbus, that's underachieving. And based on the talent they have and the schedule that they're playing this year, I expect them to win 11 games that we talked about earlier. There you see Clemson, Penn State, two teams who, per their expectations, underachieved last year, very talented. So that's kind of how you end up on this list. Miami, 1.7. They might end up with a better improvement than that, just with all the off-field changes that they've had going on. I think Cristobal is a great hire for them. And so we'll see. Again, those are the intangibles that my numbers don't capture.
Well, you're talking about Texas and USC at the top there. I mean, those are programs that should never, not at least get 7-8 wins every year. Both those teams were under that last year. So you can just bake in you should be able to bake in 7 to 8 wins automatically every year, even in a rebuilding year. And it's interesting to see New Mexico State. They're going to win more games, but they didn't win many last year at all. So I wouldn't necessarily go pound that over on New Mexico State just yet.
So in New Mexico State, I have 131 FBS teams this year with the addition of James Madison. As it stands right now, New Mexico State's sitting number 131, right? So I don't think they're going to be very good. I don't have their schedule in front of me. They might have an FCS team on there, though. They probably do, if I'm not mistaken. Something to note about my numbers, since I don't produce FCS team ratings, anytime an FBS team plays an FCS team, I assume 100% win probability for the FBS team. So when a team like Georgia, for example, plays Samford or somebody from the FCS, you're probably looking at almost 100% win probability anyway. So that doesn't really change or mess up my numbers. But when a team like Kansas, for example, in the Power Five, who's maybe not so good, plays an FCS team, or when a team like New Mexico State, who's really, really bad, worse than the FBS, plays an FCS team, it's not a good assumption to say it's 100% expected win probability. But that's just where I am with my numbers. It's a shortcoming of the model. I know that. I'd love to make FCS ratings one day. I just don't have the time or resources to do that right now. I've considered using somebody else's FCS ratings. Like I know Bill Connolly produces them. I know Jeff Sagarin produces them. But I just don't like introducing other people's numbers into my work like directly. I'll look at Bill's stuff all day. And like I said, I use the nuts and bolts of the 5 factors to make mine and all that stuff. Like I think they're obviously super smart. Bill and Brian Fremeau, who produces FEI, they're the gold standard in college football predictive analytics. So their numbers are fantastic, but I don't want to just take their work and put it into mine and use it. So I just assume 100%. Maybe one day I'll make FCS.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work you do. And, I was telling you before we went on air, it's like, yeah, I have a day job. We're going to talk about one of your day jobs a little bit in a second, which is cool. So, yeah, I mean, that's why I'm kind of doing this little side podcast and video shows. Like I want to meet my friends. I want to talk. We've never obviously met in person. We met on Twitter. We like each other's stuff. So it's really cool. And I appreciate what you're doing, but yeah, dude, it's a lot of work and people want to quote tweet and trash something. Yeah. But for the most part, it's pretty positive energy. And I appreciate being part of the community that you and so many others are doing with this stuff. Okay. So after that nice little serenade there, we're going to talk about the projected to win less, because we did the projected to win more. Here's some teams that are, and we're going to just let you just talk about Georgia way down there at the bottom, but talk about it at the top. Yeah. Wake Forest is the team that jumped out at me. It's going to have some, this looks like teams that either, they lost a lot of talent, or, you can expect some regression. So, you see Oklahoma State and Baylor both on this list, and we just saw Texas, and we saw Texas on the other list. So those are obviously, positively correlated, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to start with Georgia because I know most people listening to this or watching this are going to be Georgia fans. Guys, Georgia is going to be incredible this year. They're in my top 3. It's not even close. Like it's Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, kind of all clumped up together, and then a big drop for everybody else. The reason Georgia is on this list is because you went 12-0 in the regular season last year, which is so difficult to do. It's not even funny. I'm expecting you all to win 11 games this year. And again, I'm not going to pinpoint the one you're going to lose because I don't expect you to lose any single one. But teams are imperfect. You can get caught. Last year you did not until the SEC championship game, and then you put it right a couple weeks later in Indianapolis. So don't freak out, Georgia fans. You're going to be awesome. You're going to win 11 games, okay? Like, that's what I'm thinking. Don't worry about being number 36 on this list. To talk about some of those other ones, though, John.
Apparently you've met Georgia Twitter before.
I just wanted to get that out of the way. It's speaking of the Twitter, I don't want to get sidetracked, but Parker Fleming, Stats of War, DM'd me the other day about something. We were talking about something, and he's like, oh, dude, someone burned you or something. I was like, yeah, I know, whatever. He's like, you know what? Like, anybody who's got, just an egg avatar or just a couple followers or something, just you don't have to respond to them. And I'm like, you know what? You're right, Parker. So I've really stopped engaging with a lot of that negative energy you talked about, trying to keep it positive. And if you're just going to trash it or whatever, hey, Twitter's a free platform. Everyone can do what they want, but I'm going to use that mute button pretty liberally and not going to interact with those negative ones. So
yeah,
had to get that out there.
Absolutely, dude. Yeah, I mean, it's like what you and Parker do is just awesome. And yeah, you're doing this for free. It's like, give me a break. It's just numbers, man. Numbers.
You don't like what I have, either don't follow me, which many of the people are saying that don't, or just ignore me, block me, mute me. I don't care, but just
watch the game, nerd.
Watch the game, nerd. As I sit here to my left, I have 5 TVs set up. Guys, I watch as many games as I can. No, I know you.
It's so cool, dude. Your setup is awesome, dude.
So anyway, bringing it back to the graphic. So the teams you see on here, they're here for one of two reasons. The inverse of what we just talked about with the expected to win more. Either you overachieved last year, or you were lucky last year, or there's a combination of both, right? And so a team like Iowa, my goodness, I feel like we were talking about them for the first 2 months of the season as just the luckiest team ever. While Nebraska couldn't catch a single break, Iowa was catching every break. So Iowa shows up on here because you expect some natural regression with that luck factor. Wake Forest, great team last year. Such an exciting story. It was really cool to see them in the ACC championship game. Like, it was fun. I think they overachieved, and I think maybe this year we're going to see a little bit more of what we expected to see last year in terms of a win-loss record. Oklahoma State, Baylor, kind of same thing. Not necessarily that they overachieved, but maybe slightly, and I do expect other teams in the Big 12, such as Oklahoma and Texas, to be a little bit better this year than they were last year, and so that's going to eat into the win total for the teams that they play, since they play a full round robin in the Big 12, which I absolutely love. Those are just some of the teams you see on there. Arkansas, I feel like maybe people listening to this will like that. Some people have gotten upset and said, well, you don't think Arkansas is going to be very good? I do think Arkansas is going to be good. I think their win-loss last year was probably a little bit better than it should have been, maybe necessarily. So I think Arkansas is going to be really good, but they play in the SEC West. There's only so many wins to go around in the SEC West, so maybe that's why a team like Arkansas shows up on this list. UL Monroe, someone was like, oh, UL Monroe, that's rough when I posted this because, they didn't win a whole lot last year. Now you're saying they're going to win even less. So, again, all sorts of different teams and profiles end up on this page. Michigan State's another one up here in Big Ten country. People are like, what, you don't like Michigan State? And no, guys, Michigan State, I love Michigan State. I think what they're doing is great. I think Mel Tucker's amazing. I think last year's game against Michigan was one of the most exciting games we've seen in a long time with that comeback and the atmosphere. But then I saw what Ohio State did to him just a week later, and, that was another story. So you got to look at everything when you're looking at these numbers, looking at these teams. Just like the SEC West, there's only so many wins to go around. There's only so many wins to go around in the Big Ten East. So Michigan State, you got to play Michigan. You got to play Ohio State. You got to play Penn State. It might be reasonable to expect them to come back a win or two relative to their great 2021 season.
Well, yeah, talking about all these teams, whether it's Ole Miss, Baylor, all these teams, winning eight games in college football is remarkable. It's hard to do. I know that at the top, we see the same teams in the college football playoff a lot, or certainly this top 6 teams. But, and what people love about the old school sort of way of determining a national championship is, the regular season matters so much. And yeah, wins are hard to come by. I mean, Ole Miss won 10 games last year. A 2-game regression is not something to be, fire Kiffin about. It's a damn good season.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that yeah. Again, I think you're kind of saying the same thing with all this. It's like, yeah, the Big 12 is going to get tight. The ACC is going to be tighter than it's been. So I think it's going to be, I think we know who the best, 4 or 5 teams are, but somebody's going to come up. One of those teams is going to sneak up and surprise somebody or just catch the teams at the right time and be there as one of the top 4 teams at the end of the year.
Oh, Josh, absolutely. I mean, I'm dealing right now in the preseason. Everyone's approaching the preseason their own way. Either you like the eye test, which is almost makes me shiver, or you watch the tape and you got the X's and O's, and that's great too, or you're looking at numbers, whatever it is. Right? I just have my opinion of my favorite teams based on color. It doesn't matter. We're all speculating in the preseason, like myself included. Last year, coming into the season, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma, all those teams were preseason top 5, even in my numbers. I mean, we were like, they're probably shoo-ins to make the college football playoff. I think I even said, I posted a question on Twitter, if I remember, this has been a year ago now, but I was like, if Clemson beats Georgia, can we just Sharpie them into the playoff? And like, I probably would have leaned towards yes, looking at numbers. Now, they didn't beat Georgia, of course, and then they went on to lose a couple more games too. But my point is, while I'm saying there are these recognizable teams and names here at the top of these lists, last year we would have said Oklahoma, Clemson, Ohio State, very, very good chances. Not only did those teams not make the playoff, none of those teams even played for their conference championship game. So college football has a way of making every single Saturday exciting and count. Like upsets happen. That's why we love it. So don't sit here and think in August that, oh my gosh, it's going to be Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, and Clemson, because that's who KFord has as the top 4 teams in his preseason numbers. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if 2 of those teams did not make it. I'd probably be really surprised if more than 2 of Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia didn't make it, but who knows? I mean, we just saw last year what can happen. So yeah, nothing is written in pen or written in stone right now in the preseason. So we just have to all keep that in mind as we get ready for week 0 here in a few weeks.
That's awesome, Kelley. Thank you. Real quick, I'm going to wrap this up. We've been on for 30 minutes. You're awesome, and I'm sure everyone's going to get a kick out of this. So you've got your day job, and or one of your day jobs is, guys, he's the assistant commissioner for the Horizon League. That's just cool. And you tell me what those details, what you have to do, and then how did you get in that job? Because one day you were on Twitter, and the next day I saw you, this is a couple years now, I guess, you posted that you got a job. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, thank you. First, I think I probably make it sound cooler than it is, if we're being honest. But no, it's a lot of fun.
You're getting paid to do what you love. I mean,
yes, exactly right. So, and that's kind of what it boils down to. So, my undergrad degree is in mechanical engineering. So, I worked for a year as a mechanical design engineer at an engineering architecture firm here in Indy. Money was good, hours were good, colleagues were good, but I did not like the work I was doing. And so I was like, if I'm going to work for 40 years, I got to do something I'm a little bit more passionate about, something I enjoy doing. So thought about it, thought it'd be really cool to work in sports. Didn't really know what that looked like, but talked to some people, ended up going to graduate school at Ohio University over in Athens, Ohio, did a master's program over there to help me make that transition into sports. And so, yeah, about 5 years ago now, I started at the Horizon League, which is a Division I conference office. So think the SEC, but we don't sponsor football. Essentially, it's the same thing. They're like, our basketball, men's, women's basketball champions play in the NCAA tournament, same as Georgia would if they won the SEC, or, well, not on the men's side recently, but, you guys are turning things around. Or if they're an at-large or an AQ, like our teams are playing in that same thing. We do exactly what the SEC does, but we do it on a smaller budget, and we don't sponsor football, which really is the main differences there. But my official title is Assistant Commissioner for Competition and Basketball Strategies. So I spend 95% of my time on things related to either our basketball strategies, as is in my title, or our basketball championships, which are here in Indianapolis at the Indiana Farmers Coliseum. So that's what I do year-round, really. I do oversee men's soccer as well as men's and women's tennis, but I spend the large majority of my time doing basketball-related items. But, yeah, working in a conference office, I have a lot of fun. I tell people I work more hours, I make less money, I enjoy the people I work with just as much, if not more, but I'm happier doing it, so it's all worth it. So, yeah, no, it's been a fun journey, and I'm looking forward to what the future has in store for me at the Horizon League, and really – just what the future of college athletics looks like, right? I mean, we talk all the time, people on Twitter, about transfer portal, name, image, likeness. Should the Power 5, if they become the Power 3 or the Power 2, should they just break off? What does it look like with football governing itself? What about our Olympic sports? What about Title IX, gender equity? Like all of these buzzwords, all these topics that people talk about on Twitter, like that's what my colleagues and I are doing from 9 to 5 every single day. And then afterwards I come home and get on my computer and play around with college football power ratings. But those are the topics that we talk about all day and that we work with our membership on. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. If anyone's ever in Indianapolis, look me up and can show you our office space. You can come out to our basketball championship if you're here in March, but yeah, man, it's all good.
All right, so you talked about the Horizon just being a slightly smaller version of the SEC, but you did not mention of like who talks to the refs, who like coordinates all the calls. I mean, that's not you because checks get written in Birmingham, as we like to say down here.
So I'm not going to talk anything about SEC and you guys, the refs you got down there. But no, I have a colleague who is really our liaison to our officials. So we have coordinators of officials in all of our sports, whether it's basketball, softball, baseball, soccer, you name it. We've got people who who schedule our officials to be at all of our regular season games. And then we at the league office work with them for our championship events and all of those sports. So we've got great officials in the Horizon League. I'll speak specifically to basketball. We're in a consortium with a couple other big, like the Big Ten, the MAC, so the Mid-American, I believe the Summit, well, maybe the Summit's not in there anymore, but either way, we're in there with a few other conferences. So we all share the same pool of officials, and then we also share the costs of paying those officials. So I'll tell you, Josh, I'm not going to get on officials, and I would encourage anyone watching this to not either. Like, officiating's a really hard gig. They're not getting paid as much as you think they are. Now, I guess I don't really know about football since we don't sponsor that. But geez, we're losing people in the officiating business from professional down to college, down to high school, down to youth. And it's because you got crazy parents and you got crazy fans yelling at them because they made a bad call, or how could you miss that? Ref, you're blind. That's terrible. Baloney. Like, I'm just, guys, they don't care who wins. In 99.9% of cases, the official does not care who wins the game. You got to get off their back. So anyway, that's enough of my officials soliloquy, but there you go.
Absolutely. And it well deserved and well said as well. Okay, so we talked about your Twitter a lot. Tell everyone how to find you and follow you on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Twitter at KFord Ratings. I also have a website, www.kfordratings.com. And then my buddy Zach and I have a podcast. We're on Twitter at WeHateYourTeam_. And you can find that podcast anywhere you find your podcast. All we do is talk college football. And we're getting ready to drop the first 2022 episode here later this week. So yeah, really exciting. At KFord Ratings, at WeHateYourTeam_. Follow me, check it out. I do like to engage with people on social media. As we talked about earlier, though, if it's going to be too negative or too critical in a non-constructive way, probably not going to interact as much anymore. But if you have questions or want to discuss a certain team or something that we got going on, I'm always happy to do so.
Yeah, I was going to actually mention that. This is sort of kind of my little pet project I got going on at Dawgs Central about, meet your Twitter friends. Yeah, because you interact. You responded to me, you retweeted, you interact. He interacts with you guys. So if you got questions, he's gonna get back to you. So yeah, keep it positive, keep it real, and follow Kelley on Twitter. Anything else before we get out of here, Kelley?
No, that's it, Josh. I just want to say thanks. I mean, this was awesome. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I've loved looking at your stuff from afar, and to be a part of it's been really cool. So thanks so much. And anytime you want to do it again, I'm game.
All right. With that, thank you. Please follow him on Twitter and check out dawgcentral.com for all Georgia updates. We're doing a lot of preseason stuff. And Kelley, thank you again, and we'll see you on the Twitter blogs.
Thanks, Josh.